As the clock neared midnight, Mia meticulously wiped away the final droplets of water from the gleaming surface of the dining room table. The expansive house was shrouded in a profound silence, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves outside the window as the wind danced through the branches in the garden. The mansion's dim lighting cast a warm, golden glow on the antique furniture, creating an aura of elegance and serenity. Mia cherished these late-night moments when the household was asleep, allowing her to pause and soak in the luxurious tranquility that felt worlds away from her everyday existence. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. With deliberate steps, Mia traversed the long corridor, ensuring everything was in impeccable order. The carpet runners were perfectly aligned, and the decorative pillows on the sofas were arranged with precision. As she passed by little Lucy's playroom, she couldn't resist a peek inside. The young girl lay peacefully asleep, curled up in her bed amidst a sea of stuffed bears and dolls. A gentle smile graced Lucy's face, perhaps a reflection of sweet dreams. Mia quietly closed the door and continued on her way, making her way back to her room in the servants' quarters. Reflecting on her life, Mia felt a deep sense of gratitude for her stable job and the chance to save for her dream of owning her own home. Her room was modest yet cozy, a personal sanctuary where every item had its place. She sat at her old wooden desk, illuminated by a small lamp, and retrieved a notebook and pen from the drawer. As she recorded her weekly savings, she felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing each small amount brought her closer to her goal. Suddenly, a noise outside the window caught her attention. Mia looked out to see Nancy, her employer's wife, walking down the alley. The cool night air sent a shiver through Mia as she watched Nancy, wrapped in a warm blanket, making her way towards the garden gazebo. It was clear that something was troubling her. Nancy's steps were unsteady, her head bowed in contemplation. Mia immediately abandoned her calculations, her heart attuned to the emotions of the woman she had come to regard as a friend rather than just an employer. She quickly donned a jacket and left her room to offer Nancy her support. When she reached the gazebo, Nancy was seated on a bench, gazing at the dark silhouettes of the garden. Hearing Mia's footsteps, Nancy looked up. "Mia, I'm glad you're here," she whispered softly. The warm evening air enveloped the garden, casting the mansion's gardens and terraces in the gentle glow of the setting sun. In this peaceful solitude, the garden felt like an oasis where the boundaries between master and servant blurred. Nancy sat in a comfortable chair on the terrace, her face illuminated by the flickering flame of a candle in a glass lantern. Despite her exhaustion from a long day's work, Mia felt a sense of lightness and joy from their shared conversation, the fatigue evaporating in the warmth of their companionship. "Mia, do you think this nail polish suits me?" Nancy asked, holding up her fingers painted in a delicate pink shade. "Oh yes, Nancy, it perfectly matches the color of your dress," Mia replied, genuinely admiring her employer's refined taste. Nancy smiled and looked at Mia warmly. She not only accepted compliments but also cared about Mia's opinion on various aspects of life. "Mia, how are you? How is your plan to buy your own home going?" Nancy asked, steering the conversation to more personal topics. Mia hesitated briefly, as sharing her aspirations was something she seldom did, even with close friends, let alone her employer. However, the sense of trust and openness in the air allowed her to feel at ease. "I'm making steady progress, Nancy. Every penny counts, and I'm almost there for the down payment, thanks to your husband's fair wages. It's my dream to own my own apartment, though the accommodation you've provided is very comfortable," she confided with a shy smile. Nancy's eyes lit up with genuine happiness. "That's fantastic, Mia. I completely understand everyone needs a place to call their own. I'm so thrilled for you," she exclaimed with heartfelt joy. Nancy's face then grew pensive as she shared her own struggles. "You know, I have dreams too. Sometimes this enormous house feels like a cage. I yearn for something new, perhaps to start a venture of my own. Our business has become overwhelming, and I thought that after Lucy was born, my life would be filled with joy and new experiences. But it turns out, I'm a competent businesswoman, but I feel like a failure as a mother," she admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. Mia looked at Nancy with a mixture of surprise and empathy. Such personal conversations were rare and brought them closer together. In these moments, they were not just employer and servant, but two women sharing their deepest thoughts and vulnerabilities. "Nancy, I think you're just going through a rough patch. You're not a bad mother. You're incredibly strong and talented. You just need some time, and I'm sure your maternal instincts will blossom," Mia said softly, her voice filled with reassurance. Nancy placed her hand on Mia's, her eyes brimming with gratitude. As the evening progressed, they delved into a wide range of topics, from the simple pleasures of life to more profound and complex questions. They sipped on fragrant herbal tea, its warmth spreading through their hands and hearts, creating a comforting atmosphere of camaraderie. However, the harmony in the house began to wane with the arrival of a new young and attractive nanny named Anna. The once well-maintained facade of a happy family life started to crack. The frequency of arguments between the husband and wife increased, their raised voices piercing through closed doors and heightening the tension within the household. One evening, as Mia was finishing up her cleaning duties in the living room, she couldn't help but overhear one of these heated exchanges. The argument was so intense that even the closed doors couldn't suppress the shouting. Trying to remain unnoticed, Mia was about to leave when Nancy suddenly burst into the room, tears streaming down her face. Nancy's distress was palpable, and Mia's heart ached for her. She quickly approached Nancy, offering a comforting embrace. "Nancy, what happened?" she asked gently, her voice filled with concern. Nancy struggled to speak through her sobs. It's just so hard, Mia. Everything is falling apart," she whispered, her voice trembling. Mia held her tighter, trying to offer as much comfort as she could. "You're not alone, Nancy. We'll get through this together," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. As they sat together in the dimly lit room, the bond between them grew stronger. They were no longer merely employer and servant, they were two women united by shared dreams, fears, and an unspoken promise to support one another through the trials of life. "Nancy, do you need help?" Mia asked gently as Nancy walked by. Nancy's response was sharp and dismissive. "That's none of your business, Mia. Just do your job and stay out of it," she snapped before disappearing into her chambers. This harsh encounter marked a turning point for Mia. She realized it would be best to steer clear of the family's internal conflicts and focus solely on her responsibilities. However, the tension from the incident lingered, casting a dark shadow over the household. The atmosphere grew increasingly hostile, with Nancy's husband frequently venting his frustrations on the staff. His raised voice and constant criticism over minor mistakes created an environment of fear and uncertainty. The oppressive behavior led to a wave of dismissals. Employees began leaving the house, unwilling to endure such treatment. Those who stayed found themselves overwhelmed with double the workload, often working late into the night to keep up with the demands. Mia, too, felt the pressure mounting. The extended hours and relentless stress began to take a toll on her health and energy, but she couldn't afford to leave. She was on the brink of achieving her dream of saving enough money for a down payment on a mortgage. "It's getting worse," Mia confided in one of the cleaners as they finished their shift together. "I don't know how much longer I can stay here," the cleaner replied quietly. Mia nodded. "I need just a little more time. I've almost reached my goal." For Mia, it was a constant struggle to balance her personal well-being with her financial aspirations. Despite the hardships, she was determined to endure. Amid the growing turmoil, Anna, the new nanny, seemed unaffected by the ongoing drama. She spent her time diligently performing household chores and caring for little Lucy, avoiding interaction with the rest of the staff and making no effort to integrate into the team. Her aloof behavior created a sense of detachment around her, and many of the servants began to notice that Anna acted as if she were above the fray. Nancy, worn out by the endless arguments and conflicts with her husband, felt increasingly trapped and powerless. Once so elegant and full of life, she now often appeared to Mia in a disheveled state, lost in gloomy thoughts with a glass of wine in hand by midday. Her interest in her daughter and home had waned, and she had shifted all her maternal responsibilities onto Anna's shoulders. The changes were stark and disheartening. Nancy, who had once radiated confidence and vitality, now seemed a shadow of her former self, weighed down by despair. The household, once a place of order and tranquility, was now a cauldron of stress and discord. Despite the dire circumstances, Mia's resolve remained unshaken. She clung to her dreams and the hope that someday she would escape this turbulent environment and find the peace and stability she yearned for in her own home. The tension in the house reached its boiling point on a stormy evening when, after yet another bitter argument, the husband struck Nancy. Without a moment's hesitation, she packed a few belongings, summoned her driver, and left the house. Her departure seemed to leave her husband unfazed. He made no effort to stop her. Mia was bewildered by this cold indifference, especially considering that little Lucy was still in the house, left uncertain about her mother's whereabouts and return. In the aftermath, the husband's behavior grew increasingly volatile and tyrannical. He fired staff members for the slightest infractions, and his shouting became a daily torment. The once stable atmosphere of the house was now so suffocating that many employees contemplated leaving. But for Mia, departure was not an option. She was agonizingly close to her goal, and each day spent in the house was a test of her resilience and fortitude. As night fell, Mia found herself lost in reflection. Lying in her bed, she listened to the rhythmic patter of rain against the window in her modest room in the servants' quarters, pondering her future. The money for the mortgage down payment was almost saved, and the thought of leaving this oppressive place soon provided her with a glimmer of hope. Just a little longer, she whispered to herself. Just a little longer, and I can begin anew. Each day in the house demanded more strength and patience from her, but the promise of a better future kept her going. Working late into the night became her norm as she tirelessly saved every penny for her dream. On moonless nights, the house took on a haunting quality. The shadows seemed deeper, and the silence was only punctuated by her footsteps and occasionally the cries of little Lucy. Despite Anna's presence, the child often found herself alone in her room, crying out for the mother who was no longer there to comfort her. Mia's heart ached at the thought of the little girl abandoned and deprived of affection. Yet the fear of losing her job and the need to maintain professional boundaries kept her from intervening. I can't afford to interfere, she reminded herself whenever she heard the heart-wrenching cries through the closed door of Lucy's room. I need to focus on my own future, but night after night, her resolve wavered as she witnessed the child's suffering. One evening, as the crying became unbearable, Mia couldn't stand it any longer. She quietly approached Lucy's room, turned the handle slowly, and stepped inside. Lucy was sitting in her crib, clutching a stuffed bear, her small face streaked with tears. "Lucy, sweetheart, you're not alone," Mia whispered gently as she approached the crib. She carefully lifted the little girl, cradling her in her arms, and began to soothe her with a lullaby from her own childhood. Holding Lucy close, Mia rocked her back and forth, singing softly until the child's sobs subsided. In that moment, Mia felt a profound connection to the little girl, a sense of purpose beyond her own ambitions. She realized that her presence could offer Lucy the comfort and security she desperately needed, even if only temporarily. As the night wore on, Mia continued to hold and comfort Lucy, silently vowing to be there for her as much as she could, despite the chaotic and uncertain environment they both found themselves in. From that night forward, Mia made it a point to check on Lucy whenever she could. The bond they formed gave Mia a renewed sense of strength and determination. She was still focused on her goal of saving enough money to secure her own future, but she also found solace in knowing that she could provide some measure of care and love to a child who had been left to navigate the complexities of a broken home. Each lullaby, each comforting embrace, became a testament to Mia's resilience and compassion, qualities that would ultimately guide her through the trials she faced and lead her to the brighter future she envisioned. With each passing day, Mia found herself contemplating the situation in the house more and more. Conversations with colleagues only confirmed her fears. "Mia, you'd better stay away from the child. Remember, you're a cleaner, not a nanny," advised one colleague. "If the boss finds out you're meddling where you shouldn't, he'll fire you without pay. And what can you change? You'll only worsen your situation." Mia knew it was true. Every time she returned to cleaning, she felt the weight of responsibility and fear settling on her shoulders. But seeing the child suffering and doing nothing about it was unbearable for her. Gathering her strength, Mia decided to follow her heart's guidance. She began to secretly visit the nursery every night to make sure Lucy was sleeping peacefully. These clandestine visits became a small ray of light for Mia in the dark sea of her night work. She felt like she was doing something good in this crazy world of wealth and lies, where adult problems overshadowed the needs of a little child. "I can't change much," Mia thought as she tucked Lucy in, "but I can make her nights a little warmer." And despite the risk she was taking, in those moments, Mia felt like she was doing something right. That particular night was different. The husband had thrown a party that lasted well into the early hours, and by morning the house was supposed to sparkle as if nothing had happened. Armed with a bucket, rags, and numerous cleaning supplies, Mia methodically began to clean up. The lingering scent of alcohol and expensive perfume still permeated the halls, and the floors were strewn with remnants of decorations and confetti. As Mia went about her work, the sounds of revelry gradually faded, and the house fell silent, interrupted only by the occasional noise from the street outside. However, this silence was suddenly shattered by the loud cries of little Lucy coming from the nursery. Mia tried to ignore the crying, knowing she needed to finish cleaning, but her maternal instinct took over. She left the bucket of water and gently cracked open the door to the nursery. There, in the dim light illuminated only by a star-shaped nightlight, Lucy sat in her crib, crying in solitude. There was no father or nanny by her side to comfort her. Approaching the crib, Mia carefully lifted the child and made her more comfortable, offering her fallen pacifier. Lucy gradually calmed down, snuggling against Mia, and soon her eyes closed again. After the girl fell asleep, full of anger towards the nanny and perplexity about her irresponsibility, Mia decided to find Anna and understand what was going on. She silently made her way through several corridors, listening. Moans and murmurs emanated from under the door of one of the guest rooms. Evidently, the nanny and the homeowner were having fun. Pressed against the wall, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness, Mia couldn't intervene, knowing it could cost her job. But she recognized the voice of the young nanny. Returning to the nursery to reassure herself that Lucy was all right, Mia made sure the girl was sleeping soundly before leaving to continue her cleaning. She worked through the remaining part of the night, cleaning up the remnants of the party, which now seemed even more absurd and meaningless. As the first rays of morning light streamed through the windows, the house gleamed with cleanliness. Mia, exhausted but resolute, gathered her things to briefly return to her room and rest before the next workday. The light of the early morning barely pierced through the clouds when Mia woke up after a short, restless sleep. The night shift had left her exhausted, but the events of the previous night lingered in her mind, refusing to let her rest. She remembered Lucy's crying, her lonely gaze, and the nanny's laughter in the background. These images haunted Mia. Gathering her strength, she headed to the kitchen where the staff usually had breakfast. Making herself a strong cup of tea, Mia found Gloria, who was already sipping coffee in a corner. "Gloria, I need to talk to you," Mia began, sitting across from her. "What happened?" Gloria looked at her with cautious interest. Mia recounted the events of the previous night, how she comforted Lucy and what she saw and heard. She expected support, but Gloria's reaction was not what she had hoped for. "Mia, you're better off forgetting everything you saw," she said sharply. "It's none of your business. It's not your child. If you start interfering, you'll only get yourself into trouble. It's not worth it." Her colleague's words made Mia freeze. She understood the risks, but her heart couldn't reconcile with the idea of leaving little Lucy unprotected. "I can't just stand by and do nothing," Mia said quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. Gloria sighed and looked at her with sympathy, but there was also confusion in her eyes. "Be careful, Mia. This house. You won't change anything." Returning to work, Mia already knew it was going to be a tough night. As usual, the husband and nanny had left, leaving Lucy alone. Hearing the familiar cry, she quickly rushed to the girl. Taking her in her arms, she felt the little body trembling with sobs. Mia realized Lucy was hungry. Without hesitation, she took the girl to the kitchen and fed her. Once calmed down, Lucy soon fell asleep in Mia's arms. Mia sat with Lucy until she fell into a deep sleep. There wasn't much time left for cleaning. Carefully placing her back in the crib, Mia returned to work. As the morning approached and the house slowly began to awaken, the husband and nanny returned. They were clearly hungover and didn't notice Mia until she began to mop the floors. "Why are you working so slowly?" the husband asked, as if looking for a reason to be annoyed. Mia remained silent in response and continued her work, trying to maintain composure and focus. Her thoughts were with Lucy, and anger welled up inside her as she saw the nanny, the one who should be taking care of the girl, not her father. Mia had hardly slept after her last night's shift before the new workday began. She felt exhausted, emotionally more than physically. As she prepared for cleaning, one of her colleagues approached her with a question. "Mia, you finished so late yesterday. What happened?" Her voice was full of concern. "I just made sure Lucy was okay," Mia replied uncertainly, avoiding eye contact with her colleague. "Mia, it's none of your business. Don't meddle with the child. It could end badly," her colleague said sternly. Looking away, Mia nodded, but defiance grew in her heart. She couldn't remain indifferent, knowing the little girl needed help. That night was no less tense. The homeowner and nanny, apparently forgetting all their household duties, were having fun by the pool. Mia could hear the noise of their conversations and laughter, but Lucy's crying was nowhere to be heard, which worried her even more. Mia cautiously approached the nursery door, nervously touching the handle. She quietly entered. The dim light of the nightlight barely illuminated the room. The crib was covered with a large blanket, muffling sounds. Removing it, Mia saw Lucy, whose eyes were full of tears. Little hands reached out to her, and Mia's heart broke with pity. "Sweetheart, everything will be okay," she whispered, lifting the girl into her arms. Lucy cuddled close to her, seeking comfort and warmth. Mia fed Lucy, calmed her down, and gently put her back in the crib. As she left, she glanced back at the sleeping girl, promising herself that tomorrow everything would change. Upon returning to the main house, Mia continued cleaning. The drunken voices of the homeowner and nanny quieted down, and soon they returned to the house. The homeowner, noticing Mia, rudely remarked, "You've been here all night, working as slow as a snail." Mia simply nodded, swallowing the bitterness of his words and trying to focus on the task. When the sound of their footsteps faded, she sighed with relief and continued her work. The night was sleepless despite her fatigue. Her thoughts revolved around Lucy and her vulnerable position in this vast, cold house. By morning, she felt exhausted, but her determination burned brighter than ever. She knew she had to do something to protect the little girl, regardless of the risks to herself. As soon as Mia made sure the nanny was alone in the kitchen, she entered, preparing herself for an unpleasant conversation. "Anna, you can't treat Lucy like this. She's just a child." Mia's voice trembled with anger and concern. "At least pretend to do your job. Otherwise, the child could get hurt." Anna, unexpectedly calm and self-assured, just smirked in response. "Mia, mind your own business. If I want to, you won't stay here. And don't worry about the child. Soon I'll take the mistress's place. And the first thing I'll do is send her to an orphanage." These words hit Mia like a stab with a knife. In anger, she struggled to hold back tears. Anna picked up a plate with breakfast leftovers and, without hesitation, threw it at Mia. The plate shattered on the floor next to Mia's feet, breaking into small pieces. "Clean this up and don't stick your nose in other people's business," Anna coldly said, leaving the kitchen. Mia stood stunned and alone in her helpless anger. Deep down, she knew that turning to the homeowner for help would be futile. Tears of bitterness and powerlessness briefly clouded her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She began cleaning, trying to focus on her work to distract herself from heavy thoughts. In the evening, when the homeowner finally woke up after a long post-party sleep, the nanny, now sober and seemingly forgetting her nighttime rivalries, hurried to tell him about the incident. "Darling, your cleaner Mia was yelling at me this morning. She began lying, and she's always trying to interfere with Lucy. And I think she's stealing from the house." The homeowner, barely hiding his irritation, summoned Mia. "Mia, I've heard you're causing problems. Finish your work and get out of the house. And don't even think about leaving before you've cleaned up. You won't see your pay for this month." His voice was harsh and unforgiving. Mia stood before him, listening to his words, which sounded like a sentence. She felt a chill run down her spine. However, deep down, she only thought about the girl. Mia sat at the dining table with other cleaners, grim and withdrawn. She shared the news of her dismissal with them, and her colleague, who had always warned her against unnecessary interference, just sighed heavily. "I warned you, Mia." "It was inevitable," Irina said with regret in her voice. "I know," Mia replied quietly, "but I couldn't just watch that little girl suffer." Her thoughts were only with Lucy, her heart filled with worry for the little one every second. When she started her final shift, guests were already gathering for the next party. Music was playing outside, and the merriment was in full swing, but no one thought about the little girl left unattended. Mia was cleaning on the floor when she heard Lucy's familiar cry through the noise of the party. Her heart squeezed. She dropped a cloth and bucket and headed to the nursery. There, in the semi-darkness, she found Lucy in her crib, the girl's eyes full of tears. Mia lifted Lucy into her arms, and the little one immediately hugged her around the neck. Comforting the girl, she felt Lucy smile at her through the tears for the first time. This moment melted Mia's heart. She realized she couldn't leave Lucy in this chaos. At that moment, Mia made a decision. She quickly gathered some of the child's belongings, packed them in a bag, picked Lucy up, and quietly left the house through the back door. The girl didn't resist. She watched everything with interest. Mia hailed a taxi and went straight to the nearest hotel. After feeding Lucy and putting her to sleep in the hotel room bed, Mia sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. Lucy's peaceful sleep contrasted with the storm of emotions swirling in Mia's head. She realized she had committed an act that could be interpreted as kidnapping because essentially it was. Mia was horrified. Sitting in the quiet of the room, she tried to think about her next steps. She faced a multitude of problems: the legal consequences of her actions, the possibility of criminal prosecution, and the need to protect Lucy from a possible return to a home where she was not wanted. It all swirled in her mind like a whirlpool with no way to stop it except sleep. Mia sat in the corner of the small hotel room, looking at the sleeping Lucy. Weak rays of morning sun pierced through the curtains, illuminating the quiet corner where the girl found temporary refuge. But for Mia, the morning did not bring its usual calm. It came with the weight of urgent decisions. With panic barely suppressed, she dialed her colleague's number, who was supposed to be at work at that moment. The phone call broke the silence, and after a few rings, there was a response. "Irina, it's me, Mia. I did it. I took Lucy from the house," she began quietly, trying to stay calm. "Mia, what have you done? You must return the child immediately. There's police everywhere. They'll find you and throw you in jail." Irina was clearly shocked, her voice trembling with outrage and fear. "Irina, I understand what you're saying, but it's too late. I'm already facing jail time, and I can't just return her like that. They didn't care about her. I have to do something to help Lucy," Mia pleaded. "Okay, Mia, I'll look for Nancy's number. She's still her mother. You have to call her and tell her everything. Maybe she can help you. I'll try to find it in the address book, but you have to be very careful." Irina promised to help, although her voice still trembled with nervousness. While Irina searched for the number, Mia sat next to Lucy, trying to gather her thoughts. Soon, the phone rang again. "I found the number. I'll send it to you right now. Be careful," Irina said briefly. As soon as Mia received the message, she immediately dialed Nancy's number. Meanwhile, the police had already begun their investigation at the house. An officer questioned the nanny, who pretended to be upset, but her cold eyes and bored look betrayed her indifference to what was happening. A police car stopped in front of the hotel entrance where Mia was hiding. With them came the homeowner and the nanny, both looking worried but in different ways. The nanny actively demonstrated care, taking Lucy in her arms and holding her close as if she had been worrying about her all this time. The girl didn't want to be held by her nanny. She cried and struggled. The homeowner, on the other hand, was clearly furious and struggled to contain his anger. He was more interested in punishing Mia than bringing his daughter back home. Mia stood in the hotel corridor, surrounded by police officers. When she saw the homeowner yelling, her heart squeezed with fear and hopelessness. One of the officers approached her and, without saying a word, handcuffed her. The scene unfolded in front of the hotel staff and guests, who couldn't believe that such a sweet girl could be a criminal. "It's going to be okay, Lucy. Don't worry," the nanny spoke softly to the girl, although her eyes were cold inside. She was upset that the girl had been found so quickly and she would have to spend time on her again. Mia was quickly put into the car and taken to the police station. In the cell, she felt utterly alone and cut off from the world. All her hopes and plans collapsed in an instant. She sat on the hard bench, staring into space, while thoughts of the consequences of her actions swirled in her head. Detective Rick, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, entered the interrogation room. He sat across from Mia, studying her carefully. I don't know what's going on and what prompted your actions," he began. "But why did you act this way? You understand that this is a serious crime." Feeling the weight of guilt and fear, Mia remained silent. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she held back. She didn't know how to explain her actions in a way that would be understood and forgiven. I couldn't leave her there," she finally squeezed out. "I saw her suffering. I felt like if I didn't help, no one would." Rick nodded, jotting down her words. "I see that you're not a typical criminal, and I believe you only wanted to help. But we have laws, and the homeowner is an influential person. That complicates things. I'm sure you didn't intend to kidnap the child for sale or ransom, but you face a sentence just like real kidnappers." Mia bowed her head, tears cascading down her face like a relentless storm. She felt utterly shattered by the uncontrollable chaos that had enveloped her life. That night, she languished in a desolate police station cell, surrounded by unforgiving cold walls and an oppressive sense of isolation that stifled any hope of sleep. Every noise in the corridor jolted her, and the tormenting thoughts of her actions gnawed at her relentlessly. The weight of guilt and dread for the future clung to her, and by the time dawn broke, she was utterly drained. As the first light of morning pierced her cell, the full gravity of her predicament sank in. Tears flowed anew, an uncontrollable torrent she could not hold back. She wept silently, her sobs muffled as she tried to avoid drawing the guards' attention. Detective Rick, who had tirelessly spent the entire night at the station questioning witnesses and compiling evidence for Mia's case, appeared exhausted and haggard. Despite his weariness, he approached Mia's cell with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Handing one through the bars, he offered a small, weary smile. "Morning coffee, Mia." "I know it's not much, but maybe it'll help a bit," he said softly. Mia accepted the cup, her hands shaking. She murmured her thanks and took a tentative sip, feeling the hot liquid sear her parched lips. "I've been talking to your colleagues and neighbors all night. I understand why you did it. I'll do everything I can to help, though the father is pushing for the harshest penalty," Rick continued, his voice heavy with fatigue yet filled with genuine compassion. "Thank you, Rick. I really appreciate it," Mia whispered, her voice quivering with raw emotion. Rick knelt to meet Mia's gaze, looking into her eyes with earnest empathy. "What would you like to eat?" "After I get some rest, I can bring you something from the cafe nearby," he offered kindly. Mia managed a faint smile, finding unexpected solace in his concern. "Maybe something sweet." "Thank you, Rick," she replied, her anxiety about the future momentarily eased. Rick nodded and slowly stood up. He promised to return as soon as possible, leaving Mia alone with her thoughts and the comforting warmth of the coffee in her hands. After his grueling night shift, Rick longed for even a brief respite to clear his mind. But just as he closed his eyes, his rest was shattered by a piercing cry from the corridor. A woman's voice, laden with fury, reverberated through the station. Rick abruptly lifted his head from an improvised pillow made of a document folder, rubbing his eyes in an attempt to collect himself. "How dare you arrest Mia? I'll sue you all for abuse of power," the woman's voice rang out as she stormed into his office. It was Nancy, flanked by a cadre of resolute-looking lawyers, all as determined and fierce as she was. Rick swiftly stood up, shaking off the remnants of fatigue from his tense night of work. "It was my directive. I'm Lucy's mother," Nancy declared, her eyes blazing with indignation. "Why was she arrested? How dare you?" Rick, though taken aback, tried to maintain his composure and professionalism. "Your husband filed a kidnapping report." "Mia didn't explain anything when she was detained," he replied, striving to keep the situation under control. "She acted on my instructions. Mia is my daughter's nanny, and I asked her to take Lucy away from home," Nancy asserted, her voice trembling on the edge of hysteria, yet resolute. However, this wasn't entirely true. Nancy had only learned of the situation after one of Mia's colleagues managed to reach her. Rick listened carefully, his initial surprise shifting to relief. This new information could significantly alter the case's trajectory. "All right, I understand. This changes things." Rick quickly grabbed the phone. "I need to contact your husband immediately. He needs to come here so we can discuss everything." Rick dialed the father's number, explaining the situation and insisting on his immediate presence at the station. As he spoke, Nancy and her lawyers stood anxiously nearby. "I'll do everything I can to resolve this," Rick assured them after hanging up. "We'll review the charges against Mia, considering your information." Nancy nodded, her fierce demeanor softening slightly but still asserting her authority. As Mia emerged from the police station, the sun was shining brightly, heralding a new day and new beginnings. Detective Rick escorted her to the exit, smiling warmly. "I'm glad for such a positive outcome," he said. Mia returned his smile and, half-jokingly, mentioned that her phone number was in her file if he wanted to contact her. They both chuckled, but their conversation was abruptly cut off by a loud scream. From the window of an expensive car, Nancy was energetically waving and shouting for Mia to hurry. Mia quickly approached the car and climbed inside. Her first concern was Lucy. "How is Lucy?" she asked anxiously. "Lucy is fine. She's under proper supervision now," Nancy reassured her. Mia sighed with relief but then frowned, recalling the circumstances that had led to the child's distress. "Why did you leave her?" Mia asked sternly. Nancy's face clouded with a mix of regret and sorrow. When my husband began cheating on me with anyone he could find, I realized he wanted a divorce and aimed to take over our business. I had to act to protect what's mine, Nancy explained, her voice heavy with emotion. I regret how things turned out. I had hoped to resolve everything quickly, not realizing he would fire all the nannies except his mistress. Mia listened, her heart aching for the little girl caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts. "You should have trusted me with the truth from the beginning," she said softly, though her tone carried a note of reproach. Nancy nodded, her eyes filled with remorse. "I know, Mia. I made a mistake and I'm sorry. But now I need your help more than ever to keep Lucy safe and to navigate through this mess." Mia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but her commitment to Lucy and her sense of justice gave her the strength to face it. As the car drove away from the police station, Mia resolved to support Nancy and Lucy as best she could, determined to bring some semblance of stability and peace back into their lives. Mia listened intently, trying to grasp the full weight of Nancy's words. "What are you going to do now?" she asked after a brief pause. "I'm facing a brutal divorce. My husband wants to take everything, even what isn't his. It's going to be a fierce battle, but I managed to get him out of the house, which I bought with my money, by the way. You won't have to deal with him anymore. I need a dependable nanny for my daughter." Nancy looked at Mia with hopeful eyes. "Will you agree?" Mia nodded without hesitation. The events that had unfolded only strengthened her resolve to protect little Lucy. They arrived home to find Lucy happily playing outside. Mia approached her, scooping her up in a warm embrace. "I've hired a new manager," Nancy said. "He'll explain everything and set up your role as Lucy's nanny, and for me." Nancy kissed her daughter and handed Mia an envelope. "This is for the emotional distress our family caused you. The amount should be enough to fulfill your dream." "I'm responsible too," Nancy admitted with a remorseful tone. Mia accepted the envelope, feeling the weight of her decisions lighten slightly. She looked at Lucy, playing innocently in the yard, unable to fully believe how everything had turned out. Before she could dwell on the future, she heard a familiar voice. Turning, she saw her colleague, smiling and approaching her. "Mia, I'm so glad everything turned out well," she said, hugging her tightly. "Thank you for contacting Nancy. You have no idea how much it meant to me," Mia replied, tears of gratitude welling up in her eyes. They both laughed, realizing that the toughest trials might be behind them. They headed to the kitchen to share tea and talk about the recent events. Nancy rehired some of the staff, her colleague said, pouring tea into cups. "And that nanny who had the affair with the owner? She was fired. No one's seen her since. So I guess we've already got a new nanny, huh?" Mia smiled. In the backyard of the large, now familiar home, Mia pushed Lucy on the swings. The summer morning air was warm, and the peaceful silence was a rare luxury after the turmoil of the past few months. Mia felt her life gradually returning to normal in the house, where she now felt more like a guardian than a servant. With all the chores done and household matters settled, she found a moment to contemplate her future. Sitting on a bench near the swings, she scrolled through apartment listings on her phone. Thanks to Nancy's generosity, she now had enough funds not only for a down payment, but also to buy an apartment outright. The dream of owning her place, which once seemed distant and impossible, was now within reach. The silence was suddenly broken by the sound of an approaching car. Mia looked up and saw a vehicle pulling up to the house. Rick stepped out, holding a bouquet of bright flowers. His visit wasn't unexpected. They had been in touch frequently since the night Mia spent in the cell. She called out to the other nanny, who now helped with the house and Lucy. After explaining she would be back soon and giving Lucy a few tender kisses, Mia hurried out to meet Rick, a bag in her hand. Rick greeted her with a warm smile, extending the bouquet. "These are for you. I hope you like them," he said, his eyes sparkling with joy. "They're beautiful, Rick." "Thank you," Mia replied, accepting the flowers. They exchanged warm smiles, their connection deepening with every encounter. As they walked together, Mia felt a sense of hope and possibility for the future, a stark contrast to the uncertainty she had faced just days before. Rick started the engine, and they drove off, leaving the house and its turbulent past behind. The evening sun bathed the streets in a golden glow as Mia and Rick cruised through the city. Mia was brimming with excitement and couldn't hold back from sharing her plans for the future. "I found an amazing apartment," Rick, she began, her voice filled with joy. "I've already envisioned everything, how each room will look, what wallpaper to choose. I've even picked out the furniture. There'll be a big comfy couch in the living room, and She continued enthusiastically, detailing every item and decoration she had already chosen in her imagination. Rick listened quietly, a smile playing on his lips, nodding along as Mia's eyes sparkled with excitement. He barely managed to get a word in, but he didn't mind. He relished in her happiness and the vivid dreams she described. After nearly an hour of uninterrupted storytelling, Mia suddenly realized she had monopolized the conversation. She laughed, a bit embarrassed, and looked at him. "Oh gosh, I got carried away. Sorry I talked your ear off. How about you, Rick? What's new?" She finally gave him a chance to speak. Rick smiled warmly, appreciating her enthusiasm. "I'm doing well, thank you. By the way, one of my colleagues mentioned some news about Nancy recently. She filed a lawsuit against her husband for fraud. He's currently on the run," he shared. "Well, he deserves it," Mia exclaimed, her voice resolute. "After everything he's done, it's only fair." Rick looked at her with a mix of surprise and curiosity. "You know, Mia, I never thought such a sweet girl could be so unforgiving," he said, smiling. Mia laughed in response. "Oh, Rick, I'm not unforgiving. I just believe in justice," she replied, her eyes sparkling with laughter again. Mia sat next to Rick in his car, filled with anticipation. He had promised the evening would be special but hadn't revealed any details. When they arrived, they were greeted by a breathtaking view, a secluded spot overlooking a serene lake, surrounded by lush green hills. Rick helped Mia out of the car, and they walked to a table set up under the open sky. They sat down, and Rick took her hands in his grip firm but gentle. He took a deep breath, as if summoning the courage for something significant. "Mia, we haven't known each other for long, and maybe I'm rushing things." He began, his voice trembling with excitement, "But I want you to be my wife. From the very first day I saw you, I knew it." Tears of surprise and joy welled up in Mia's eyes. She gazed into his eyes, seeing sincerity and love reflected back at her. "Yes, Rick, I agree," she whispered, and they embraced, their lips meeting in a long and tender kiss. As they held each other, the worries and challenges of the past seemed to melt away, leaving only the promise of a bright and hopeful future together. The evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft, romantic glow over the lake and the hills, sealing their moment with nature's blessing. Several months later, after Nancy had emerged victorious in all her lawsuits, Mia and Rick visited her at her home. In the yard, Nancy sat comfortably, savoring the peace that now enveloped her home. "Hi," Nancy, Mia called out as they approached. "Hi. How are you?" Nancy responded joyfully. Mia asked about Lucy, and Nancy replied with a smile, "She's asleep. Please try not to make any noise. You'll have plenty of time to play when she wakes up." The conversation naturally flowed into updates about life and future plans. Rick shared their exciting news: "We're planning a wedding, and we'd love for you to be an honorary guest." Nancy's face lit up with a smile. "I'd be delighted to come." Mia then mentioned that after the wedding, following their honeymoon, she could return to her duties as a nanny if Nancy needed her. Nancy raised her glass and shook her head. "No, Mia. Now that I've resolved my problems, I'll take care of my daughter myself. I'll strive to be a good mother. And you shouldn't delay becoming a mother yourself," she added with a playful wink at Rick. Rick, caught off guard by the suggestion, nearly choked on his tea, which sent Mia into a fit of laughter. She hugged Rick and planted a firm kiss on his cheek. The group settled into a comfortable silence, enjoying the tranquility and calmness of the day. The sun cast a warm glow over the yard, and the atmosphere was filled with a sense of renewed beginnings and peaceful resolutions. Nancy leaned back in her chair, reflecting on how far they had come, while Mia and Rick shared a quiet moment of contentment, holding hands and imagining the bright future ahead of them. They all felt a deep sense of gratitude and happiness, knowing that the trials of the past had led them to this serene and hopeful present. As the cleaning lady Mia heard the billionaire's daughter crying every night, she was moved to take action, leading to a cascade of events that reshaped her life and those around her. Through perseverance, courage, and compassion, Mia navigated through hardships and emerged stronger, embodying the power of resilience and the importance of standing up for what is right. What have you learned from Mia's journey? Take a moment to reflect on the lessons from this story and comment below on one thing you have learned and plan to apply in your own life. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. If you liked this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories and life lessons. Thank you for watching.